Hi students, Ms. Bird here. In this lecture we're going to continue learning about ancient Mesopotamia. Today we're going to be focusing on this part that actually is right here, that it is the cradle of civilization. We're going to find out why ancient Mesopotamia is often called that. So it is the birthplace of civilization. In a previous lecture, you learned about what a nomad is. And a nomad, just for reminders, is a person who wanders around in search of food. They don't live in one place like we do today. So think for a second, what are some benefits of living in one place instead of wandering around like a nomad? If the first thing that came to your mind is a constant supply of food, then you would be right. So there was more food, something, more reliable food source, better nutrition. Those two things lead to more babies being born, and those babies are healthier and have a better chance of surviving into adulthood. So pause and take a note. Now think, what might be some possible problems of settling down, living in one place, all of a sudden maybe having some neighbors that you didn't have before? Well, if you were thinking, I don't know, maybe it would be a problem if those neighbors have a dispute with each other. Or if a neighbor thinks, hey, this is my land, and you say, no, this is my land. Well, pretty soon a need arises to have some sort of ruler, or somebody there to help decide and make those decisions. Like, okay, this is his land, this is your land. What might be another problem? What if you have spent all summer working hard on your land? Let's say you're this guy here, tilling your land, plowing, planting seeds, and then along comes some people from a neighboring village whose crops maybe didn't turn out as well. They could just steal your crops. That was a problem too. So cities, to prevent that problem, started building tall walls around them. Pardon me, not cities yet. Really mainly villages and towns at this point. So that leads us into the question of what is a civilization? Well, here's our first definition. A civilization is defined as people who organize themselves into cities or towns as opposed to small tribes or family groups. Pause and take a note. Now, that's a little bit of a simple and kind of wordy definition all at the same time. So let's look at some characteristics that make up a civilization. These are just some of the things. One of the big ones is that they have a government and that they have a shared ruler or rulers. They also might have art, and especially a shared sense of art or type of art. Also in a civilization, we have this idea of specialization. In a civilization or in a society, I can choose to do only one job. If I want, I can choose to be a potter, and that's all I do is I make pots. Well, if I didn't live in a civilization or with people next to me that I could then trade with, that probably wouldn't work out very well. If I was a nomad and all I did was make pots, I'd die off pretty soon because I wouldn't have anything to eat. You can't eat a pot. But in a civilization, I can specialize and get really good at making pots and make the best pots in town. And then I can trade those pots with my neighbor who grows grain and my other neighbor who raises goats. So only in a civilization is that possible. Some other characteristics are a shared sense of architecture or architecture in general. That's not something we have with nomads because they're not living in one place, so they're not going to build a building, so obviously they're not going to have any sense of architecture. There's also a shared language in a civilization. It's going to be really hard to cooperate with each other if you can't communicate at all. So pause and take a note. Civilization in the Fertile Crescent. It started in the Fertile Crescent not because there were so many resources there, but because the Fertile Crescent could actually be a somewhat hostile environment. So it is the Fertile Crescent because compared to the land around it, we have deserts to the south, mountains to the north. The Fertile Crescent was much better than everything around, but it would still flood with some regularity. It might get really hot and dry for a while. So life was still hard in the Fertile Crescent. And so that means if you planted your grain, you wanted to make sure that some neighboring group of people wasn't just going to come along and steal all your hard work. So you really wanted to have a strong leader, make sure that you get along with your neighbors in your village so that you have some help defending your land. If there were tons and tons of resources, civilization might not have started there in the way that it did. They might not have needed rulers and to come together in quite the way they needed to in the Fertile Crescent. So pause and take a note. And so after a while, these small villages start to grow into larger and larger cities. And as that happens, more and more people are now part of those civilizations. And stronger leadership became even more necessary for these small villages. So there you have it, the birth of civilization. See you next time.